Thank you. Thank you. That concludes general questions, and we come to the next item of business, which is questions to the First Minister. Question number 1 is from Ian Gray.
To ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day.
First Minister.
Well, later today I'll be taking part in a conference call with the directors of Outplay Entertainment, Richard and Douglas Hare, who have announced today that they will be returning home from California to locate their new games company in the city of Dundee, creating 150 new jobs. I know that the entire Chamber will welcome this announcement, which is a significant boost to the games industry in Scotland.
Ian Gray.
Presiding Officer, new jobs are always welcome, but of course we are losing jobs all over Scotland. Two months ago I told the First Minister that the SNP in Renfrewshire were planning to sack 60 teachers and replace them with unqualified staff for part of the school week. He had no idea then what his SNP colleagues were up to. He thought it might be a mistake or a misapprehension on my part. It was not. Renfrewshire now plan to implement this in all primary schools in August. Does the First Minister support replacing teachers with unqualified staff? And is this the thin end of the wedge?
First Minister.
Well, as Ian Gray very well knows, that the proposal is not to replace teachers but to have various instructors for a variety of physical education and other matters coming into the school classroom. And I know he will welcome the announced intention of Renfrewshire Council to ask Her Majesty's Inspectorate to look at the matter to confirm that this is fully in line with guidelines in terms of education, which of course will be a lot better than North Ayrshire Council, who dominated the headlines at the weekend by apparently trying to introduce a 4-day week in Scottish education. So I think Ian Gray, before he criticises Renfrewshire Council, should really explain to us what on earth North Ayrshire Council were doing, Labour-controlled, trying to introduce a 4-day week.
Ian Gray.
Presiding Officer, I am glad the First Minister brought North Ayrshire up. I know he's had his spin doctors out trying to whip this story up. Perhaps he should have checked first. I have here an email from the leader of North Ayrshire Council which says, "I can confirm we were asked by the SNP group to bring forward radical options."
Order.
Options like a 4-day week. When I heard this, I spoke immediately to the Labour leader of North Ayrshire Council and I got his assurance this will not happen. And he went on radio and television and said it will not happen. So will the First Minister get on the phone to the SNP leader of Renfrewshire Council and get him to tell us that his plan will not happen either?
First Minister.
Yes, unfortunately for Ian Gray,
Order.
I heard the interview with the leader of North Ayrshire Council after his phone call. He said he was withdrawing the proposal for a 4-day week and introduced a new proposal to start formal education at the age of 6. I've got the transcript. Now, the only problem with starting the formal education at the age of 6, apart from the fact it would be illegal, is of course that this phone call which took place between Ian Gray and the leader needs further explanation. Did Ian Gray say to the leader of North Ayrshire Council, withdraw your proposal for the 4-day week and start education at 6 instead? Did he give him an indication that the Labour Party would seek to make it legal not to have education starting below the age of 5? Or was it a phone call which was a one-way conversation with Ian Gray refusing to listen to his North Ayrshire leader's daft ideas? So presumably we can now resolve that North Ayrshire Council ain't intending a 4-day week and ain't intending to start school at the age of 6.
Ian Gray.
I didn't just speak to the leader in North Ayrshire Council about what was happening there, which is not a 4-day week. I thought, since when I asked Alex Salmon back in December about Renfrewshire, he didn't know what was going on. He looked frantically through his big book, but he couldn't find an answer, I thought I would go to Paisley and find out what's happening by asking local parents to come and tell me. 500 of them turned up. They told me what Renfrewshire Council are planning. They're planning to take people off the long-term unemployment register, pay them £11 an hour as sessional workers, and use them to replace 60 fully qualified teachers. They think it's an outrage. They are right. Why won't Alex Salmond call a halt to this crazy plan right now?
First Minister.
I support Renfrewshire Council's decision to call in Her Majesty's Independent Inspectorate to confirm that what they are doing is in line with teaching regulations. Now, can I just correct Ian Gray on his claim on FMQs on 16 December 2010 that Renfrewshire planned to replace teachers with volunteers. That's not what the General Teaching Council made clear last week. It said that lessons during what is described as a teaching week would always be delivered by teachers. It goes on to say that this was confirmed in our discussion with Renfrewshire. And of course, the requirement for Teachers Scotland Regulation 2005 requires that any teacher employed by local authority must be a registered teacher. So teaching must be delivered by registered teachers. Now, that is the position in Scotland. That is the legal position. And given that Renfrewshire Council, by calling in the Majesty's Inspectorate, are conforming to the legal position, I am sure that Ian Gray will reassure us that North Ayrshire Council Labour Group are not going to proceed with their daft idea to start schooling illegally at the age of 6. I know what the position is in Scotland. I know what the legal position. I'm not sure what the legal position is south of the border, but I do note from the Daily Telegraph on the 11th of January this year that the former Foreign Secretary and Labour leadership hopeful David Miliband announced that he will become a, quote, untrained teacher. He will teach A-level government and politics at Haverstock School in Chalk Farm, North London. Now, if even David Miliband is trusted to come in and teach A-level students in England, can't people come in to teach physical education and other aspects out with the curriculum and be trusted with the children of Renfrewshire? Or is David Miliband in a better position than the people who come into the schools in Renfrewshire?
Ian Gray.
If I was the First Minister of Scotland and I was asked about what was happening, in schools in Renfrewshire for which I'm responsible, and I gave an answer which was about David Miliband's career plans, I would be embarrassed by that. And as for the GTC, I have the letter that Mr Salmond was reading from, and this is what it says. GTC Scotland therefore takes the view, they're talking about Renfrewshire's plans, that it would be both professionally inappropriate and potentially illegal. He didn't read that bit of it out, did he? And as for HMIE, I don't know what they will say, but I do know what 500 parents, grandparents and teachers in Renfrewshire told me on Friday. And the First Minister doesn't always take this line, does he? When Argyll and Bute Council planned to close schools, Mike Russell, who just happens to be the local SNP candidate, he ordered SNP councillors to do a U-turn. And when I challenged the First Minister on the SNP making 900 council workers redundant in Aberdeen, John Swinney ordered those SNP councillors to do a U-turn. So why won't Alex Salmond tell SNP councillors in Renfrewshire to do a U-turn on this irresponsible scheme? Is it just because he doesn't have any SNP seats in Renfrewshire that he's worried about?
First Minister.
Well, no, actually, it's because I trust the independence of Her Majesty's Inspectorate to look at the proposal and confirm that it's in line with the law. I don't think we'd need Her Majesty's Inspectorate to look at the North Ayrshire proposal, which is obviously and clearly illegal. Now, under Renfrewshire's proposal, every part of the school curriculum will continue to be taught by teachers, but teachers will not have to remain in the classroom while the extra activities termed enhancements are undertaken. The only change is that the primary teacher will no longer have to sit at the back of the class or the side of the pitch while the sports coach takes the class. Now, Ian Gray seems puzzled as to what the relevance of David Miliband attempting to do the same thing in England is to the situation in Renfrewshire or in Argyll or anywhere else.
Order.
I'll tell you what the continuing thread is. The continuing thread is why Ian Gray didn't ask me about McGrahy today. The continuing thread is why he didn't ask me about the budget today.
Order. 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 First Minister, the microphone is off. And I'm sorry, it's entirely up to Mr Gray what he asks about, I think I have to say. First Minister.
And I'm pointing out, Mr Presiding Officer, that Ian Gray didn't ask about the budget, didn't ask about McGrahy, doesn't want to hear about David Miliband south of the border, for from top to bottom, the Labour Party in Scotland is an example of organised hypocrisy.
Order. Ian Gray, very briefly.
I apologise to the First Minister. I didn't ask him the question he wanted. I'm sorry I didn't ask the First Minister the question he wanted. It's Friday night, tomorrow night. I'll get those 500 parents in Paisley back. Will he come with me and look them in the eye and tell them this is a good idea for their schools?
I'll trust the independent judgment of Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Education. And what I'll be doing this Friday is seeking to persuade people in Scotland that 25,000 modern apprenticeships is not just a fantastic deal for young people in this country, but is the reason why Ian Gray doesn't want to talk about the budget, and is 60% more than we inherited from the Labour Party. That's why this budget is good for young people all over Scotland.
Question 2, Annabel Goldie.
To ask the First Minister when he will next meet the Secretary of State for Scotland.
First Minister.
I may well meet the Secretary of Scotland this coming Monday.
Annabel Goldie.
Presiding Officer, the former UK Secretary of State for Justice, Jack Straw, claims that Kenny McCaskill tried to do a deal linking progress on air guns and slopping out with moves that could pave the way for Mr Al Megrahi, the Lockerbie bomber, to return to Libya. Can I ask the First Minister, was Kenny McCaskill acting alone, or was the First Minister complicit with him in trying to cut this odious deal?
Well, neither. If Annabel Goldie examines the documents from the Cabinet Secretary, she'll see that particular dispute is about 2007. In 2007, no one, not even Jack Straw, was attempting to return Mr Megrahi to Libya. Well, the position in 2007 is Jack Straw was trying to persuade the Scottish Government to accept a veto on prisoner transfer, as opposed to the exclusion clause which we wanted. And testimony to the fact that Jack Straw failed in his attempt to persuade us in that direction, of course, are the 8 letters from both myself and the Cabinet Secretary, 4 before the meetings under question and 4 afterwards, which make it clear that at no stage did this Scottish Government drop its opposition and its insistence that there should be an exclusion clause in the prisoner transfer agreement. So I think when Annabel Goldie takes a closer look at the record, understands the difference between 2007 and 2008 and the changes that occurred in the Labour Government's policy over that period, then she'll quite clearly see that the record clearly vindicates the position of the Scottish Government.
Annabel Goldie.
So, let's get this straight. The First Minister is telling us this was a huge confusion, just a great big muddle in all these conversations and all the correspondence and the minutes and the memos and the meetings. He is saying everyone else has got it wrong. Well, it doesn't wash, Presiding Officer. And let's move to 2009, to April 2009, when the First Minister himself raised directly with Jack Straw whether Jack Straw had a view on Mr Al Megrahi being sent back to Libya. Now, Alex Salmond has always maintained that the release of Mr Al Megrahi was an exclusively Scottish matter and no one else's business. So why was the Scottish Government giving the impression of wanting to cut a deal? And why was Alex Salmond so anxious to find out the UK Government's view on Mr al-Megrahi being returned to Libya? What on earth was going on?
First Minister.
Well, we had the American Government's view, we had the Libyan Government's view, we had submissions and indications from a range of people. What we didn't have in public was the United Kingdom Government's view. I say in public, of course, because the UK Government's policy changed in October 2008, as the Cabinet Secretary's papers indicate, to facilitate the return of Mr Megrahi to Libya, and that occurred through every level of government and relevant government department. I knew that at the time. Indeed, I have said it a number of times that that was the UK Government's position. I think they changed this week, as we now know, and have it on the public record. I find it extraordinary to believe, and even as extraordinary as Richard Baker's remarkable interview on Newsnight last Monday, that the Labour Party in Scotland did not know that that was the policy of the United Kingdom Labour government. But if she looks at the minute from a UK minute of 30th October 2008, she will see two things. One, that Mr Straw was very anxious to indicate the implications of Mr Megrahi dying in a Scottish jail. And secondly, she will see that I said three things to Mr Straw. First, that the matter of the PTA was one that caused us deep grievance. Secondly, nothing that this government ever would do or would be seen to do would cut across the processes of Scots law. And thirdly, that compassionate release could only be considered as a genuine case through the due process of Scots law. That is exactly what the Scottish Government have always maintained, which is why I believe we have been vindicated by the release of these papers. And on the subject of the charge laid against the Labour Party by so many people this week, can I just gently point out to Annabel Goldie, before she claims the Conservative Party as a whole had a consistent position on this, that both Lord Trafalgar, former Tory Minister, and Daniel Kaczynski, in their separate ways, wrote to the Scottish Government, not saying that we should follow the due process of law, but in Lord Trafalgar's case saying that we should pay attention to commercial interest, and Daniel Kaczynski's case that we should use Mr Megrahi as a bargaining chip. The record shows that the Scottish Government have been consistent throughout this affair. We have followed good faith and due process. Others have been guilty of organised hypocrisy.
Order. Question 3. Tavish Scott.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister what issues will be discussed at the next meeting of his Cabinet.
First Minister.
Next meeting of the Cabinet, issues of importance to the people of Scotland.
Tavish Scott.
Presiding Officer, the National Centre for Excellence in Traditional Music, based at Ploughton High School, provides many talented children with an opportunity to build a national and indeed an international career in music. It is surely the embodiment of Scotland's education system and the curriculum for excellence, building young people's talent, skills and their belief that they are Scotland's future. The National Centre opened in 2000 with direct government funding, which was initially continued in 2007. A year later, Highland Council had to assume complete financial responsibility. Today, they face agonising budget decisions. Will the First Minister consider how best to fund this national centre for all, a future we all want to secure?
First Minister.
Well, I should point out, Tavish Scott, that resources, of course, were transferred into the local government settlement for Highland Council to use. And just in case there was any misapprehension, Highland Council, of course, has Liberal Democrats in the administration. However, I should say to Tavish Scott that I know that the Education Secretary met John Farquhar Munro yesterday as the local MSP to discuss this issue, and therefore assure him of the determination of this government to make sure that that vital national centre is maintained to help music education across the Highlands. And I hope and believe that enthusiasm will be shared by the administration in Highland Council.
Tavish Scott.
It's a big step, Presiding Officer, when you're 14, you leave home, live in the Ploughton School hostel and attend classes in a new place. Yet for young people who take that decision, it's a sign of their commitment to Scotland's traditional music. The First Minister's government are assisting in other local authority areas. Travel, for example, to the new Burns Museum in Ayrshire is being supported by the government, not just the local council. And Stirling Council are rightly not expected to pick up the cost of the makeover of the Battle of Bannockburn site. So would the First Minister accept that this national centre should be funded by the Scottish Government, by Creative Scotland and the local authorities such as Highland and indeed Shetland, who place children to Plockton to further their musical development and careers? Will he ensure that his government now take the lead in organising that financial package?
First Minister.
Well, can I just repeat that the money was put into the local government settlement, but two, there's an obvious difference, is there not, between the marvellous new Robert Burns Museum in Alloway and the provision to local authorities across Scotland in their ability to make sure, hopefully, that every young Scot at some time in their school days will be able to visit that marvellous new museum. And again, the national resource, which will be a project between Historic Scotland and the National Trust for Scotland, to make sure that we have a magnificent new visitor centre in time for the 700th anniversary of the Battle of Bannockburn in 2014. So I do think Tavish Scott is rather skating over the issue in terms of not recognising Highland Council's responsibilities in this matter. But I really do think occasionally that Tavish Scott should try and take yes for an answer. My view, and I wasn't at the meeting yesterday between Michael Russell and John Farquhar Munro, but I know John Farquhar Munro is a passionate advocate of his constituency and the Highlands, and I know Michael Russell is somebody who is deeply interested not just in music education but in the maximum opportunities for our children in the Highlands and Islands. And I, although I haven't had a readout in the meeting, would be very surprised indeed if between these two gentlemen some progress hadn't been made to ensure the continuation of Plockton offering their vital educational experience for the children of the Highlands and Islands.
I will take a supplementary from Richard Baker.
Thank you. I shan't dwell on the irony of allegations of hypocrisy coming from this First Minister, but can he tell us what support?
Mr. Baker, I think a supplementary question at this stage really should just stick to the question, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can he tell us then what support has been given to the victims affected by the cases dropped as a result of the Cadder judgment? Is he aware that a year before the judgment, practitioners in Scotland warned his government were in breach of ECHR on this matter? And will he agree these events require there should be an emergency statement in Parliament from the Cabinet Secretary?
First Minister.
Now, where do I start with Mr Richard Baker? I might start from the fact, of course, that the highest court in Scotland, by a majority of 7-0, ruled that Scottish justice was compliant in these matters. Now, I don't know if Richard Baker is actually saying that the Lord Advocate should have taken action against a ruling of 7 judges in Scotland in the highest court in our land. It was recognised when every party in this chamber supported the emergency legislation that was necessary, that both the Crown Office and indeed the Justice Secretary had dealt expeditiously with an extraordinarily difficult position that had been presented to us. It is noted today that if the Lord Advocate hadn't acted immediately when it looked like the Supreme Court, not the highest court in Scotland, but the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, was going to deliver an adverse judgment, that many thousands more would have been affected. Emergency legislation was passed expeditiously with the support of Richard Baker. Now, I am delighted that this chamber united to pass that emergency legislation. What surprises me is to read the comments of Richard Baker today attacking the Justice Secretary when he was prepared to support that legislation as a Parliament to deal with a situation affecting many thousands of our fellow citizens. And it's the inability to look at these issues in terms of justice and the rights and expectations of our citizens, and a desperate attempt to gain some petty party advantage over these difficult situations that was the mark of Richard Baker throughout this Parliament, and why he was reduced to such a confused, rambling wreck on Newsnight last Monday.
Question for Kenny Gibson.
I asked the First Minister what the Scottish Government's position is on schools being switched to a 4-day week.
First Minister.
Well, As indicated, the Scottish Government does not support a move to a 4-day week in schools. And we now know that Ian Gray had to order on the phone his councillors in North Ayrshire to fall into line. It seems to me that cutting a full day out of the school week, which Labour-controlled North Ayrshire seems to have been planning, would have had a significant impact on pupils, their families and staff, not which would have been the difficulties and costs that parents would have had in arranging one-day childcare a week. No explanation has been offered by the Council of why they thought this was a good idea, but the fact that the Labour leader quickly dumped the plan after it became public, you would have thought he wouldn't have needed the phone call in desperate terms from Ian Gray.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the First Minister for his answer. Clearly a 4-day school week is no educational merit whatsoever, and contrary to Mr Gray's insinuation, the SNP group were not aware of this Labour proposal before it hit the media. The First Minister is aware that Labour-controlled North Ayrshire Council grant will fall by £5.5 million for the year beginning in April. The Council said it would be £64 million, causing widespread consternation among staff and service users alike, as the Council's general services budget will still be more than £340 million. And there is an underspend of £5.4 million. Does he share my concern that although difficult decisions have to be taken, North Ayrshire Council and other Labour councils are scaring parents, playing politics with children's education and worrying staff in order to overplay budget reductions for their own perceived electoral advantage?
Well, you see, I have now got the account of the David O'Neill and BBC Radio Scotland's Good Morning Scotland on the 7th of February, the Labour leader of North Ayrshire Council. He confirmed that they had a proposal to cut an entire year from school education by increasing the school age to 6 years old and keeping it in nursery for longer. He doesn't seem to have divulged the information on public that he divulged to Ian Gray. There are people, of course, who quite genuinely believe that compulsory school education should start at 6. Unfortunately, we would have to look at the Education Scotland Act 1980, which says that summer education has to be offered to people who have attained the age of 5 years and not attained the age of 16 years. So while I am relieved that North Ayrshire Labour have been blown off course in their daft plan for a 4-day week for Scottish pupils, I am still concerned that a leader of any council in Scotland should advocate an illegality of starting school education at 6. I think we need more than another phone call from Ian Gray, and no wonder he has his head in his hands.
Question 5, John Park.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what advice the Scottish Government has given to local authorities that are considering reductions in spending regarding services and facilities that should be protected.
First Minister.
Knows that our priorities were protect 1,000 extra policemen in the streets, the council tax freeze, which has saved families over £300, free personal care and small class sizes. We did this in agreement with COSLA, who took as their main objective to retain local council's share of the public sector cake. They also wanted as much protection for local councils as possible, without denying them the opportunity to take their own local view on the proposals.
John Park.
Presiding Officer, the First Minister, on announcing the Christie Commission on Public Services, said this Government is determined to ensure these services, which we hold so dear, continue to be delivered in a manner that keep the social fabric of Scotland intact. Can I perhaps provide him with an example today where that hasn't happened? The First Minister may be aware that the outdoor education centre at Ardroy in Argyll, which is operated by Fife Council, is likely to close following a decision of the Council today. Thousands of people, 5,000 people in fact, have campaigned to keep this facility open, and many have raised concerns, not with me, not just about the impending decision, but the unacceptable way in which the views of Fife Council employees in particular have been suppressed during recent weeks. It looks like it may be too late for Ardroy, but can the First Minister today send a message to all public service decision makers, insisting that they engage in a meaningful way with all communities in these difficult decisions that lie ahead? Because if they do not, there will be no social fabric left, never mind any to keep intact.
First Minister.
I think the members should bear in mind that local councils have to make decisions based on the budget and also on the priorities locally. Now, I say that because COSLA's main objective, as I said, was to retain the public sector cake, which we have done. It's doubly pleasing we have delivered as much protection for our members as possible without boxing councils in and denying them the opportunity to take their own local views and proposals we have developed with the Government. That's a direct quote from Councillor Pat Waters, the COSLA President, a Labour councillor from North Ayrshire, in response in a COSLA, South Lanarkshire, in response, yeah, Ayrshire was very much in my mind, I admit that, to North Lanarkshire in a COSLA press release. The important point that Pat Waters makes is that the settlement for Scottish local government was far better than the settlement for local government south of the border, that the outline for Mr Swinney of a flat cash settlement for the next few years is infinitely better than is being faced by councils south of the border. And I say that to John Park for the realisation that these are extraordinarily difficult times for public sector finance. And our complaint with Labour members is not that they are worried and aware of the implications at local council level. It's that they believe that we should all have a collective amnesia about why local government and central government and every public service is under such pressure. And that is because of the wrecking of the UK finances and a programme of cuts deeper and tougher than those of Margaret Thatcher, planned by the Labour government at Westminster and being implemented by the coalition government that we have now. It is a recognition of the responsibility of the Labour Party for that situation, which we are looking for from these benches.
Question 6, Jim Hume.
To ask the First Minister what recent discussions the Scottish Government has had with Forestry Commission Scotland regarding the value of forestry under public ownership.
First Minister.
Rosanna Cunningham and Scottish Government officials meet regularly with Forestry Commission Scotland to discuss a range of issues. The Scottish Government has been very clear that although there may be plans to take forests out of public ownership by the Lib Dem Conservative administration at Westminster, the Scottish Government has no such plans. Unlike the Con Dem administration, the Scottish Government recognises the enormous economic, social and environmental benefit that our forests and woodlands deliver. In addition, we have made it clear that we have an intention to plant 100 million trees by 2015, which of course forms a major part of the drive to cut CO2 emissions. We are making excellent progress towards this goal, and I am pleased to say I made a small personal contribution when I visited the Cocknoe Hills in November last year.
Jim Hume.
Well, I thank the First Minister for his answer, but we are talking about Scottish issues, and everybody knows it was the Scottish Lib Dems that forced the SNP government to U-turn on selling off our Scottish forests to the bankers. And since then, the First Minister's government has stated they are against privatisation of our forestry estate. But now we hear that a government adviser stated that Scottish forests, and I quote, are being sold piecemeal to the highest bidder, unquote, and there are facts to prove this. Since 2007, there has been a net loss of 26,000 acres of Scottish forest estate, with this government netting a forest land sales profit of £28 million. Where have these profits gone, and when will the First Minister admit that selling off our forests is still on his agenda?
First Minister.
Well, the revenue is going to purchase better value land, which is then being planted by the Forestry Commission. I mean, the plan is to increase forest cover in Scotland from 17% of the area of our country to 25%. The plan is, and we are on target for it, to have 100 million more trees planted in Scotland over the next few years. Now, given the ambition of these plans, I really do not think that it is reasonable for a Liberal Democrat member to attack the Scottish Government on our ambitious plans for forestry, particularly in the light that they may be plans announced by the coalition government in England, but they have direct implications for Scottish jobs in this city of Edinburgh. And given that hundreds of jobs are at risk as a result of the coalition government's policies in Edinburgh, I really do not think that Jim Hume should come to this chamber and say we cannot talk about what is happening in London, given the implications for jobs in Edinburgh.
Point of order, Margaret MacDonald.
Deputy Presiding Officer, the First Minister, in his answer to John Park, admitted that the local authorities have full responsibility for policy making in their own area. With the greatest of the respect, therefore, can I question why the Leader of the Opposition and the First Minister were allowed to hurl insults at each other about what local authorities should or should not do? And can I ask you to call together the leaders of the parties and remind them of the standing orders?
Well, it's not a point of order for me, and who I decide to meet is a matter entirely for me. I suspend this meeting until 2:15.